End the drug war. A personal reflection. I'm going to go out on a limb here and make this video even though I'm not really sure if my ideas are right or if they would even work. So just my personal opinion as an onlooker. I think it's all wrong, the drug war. The war on drugs, which is to say the laws on drugs are all wrong. They've got them stuck in the 70s, man. Read it and weep. The Misuse of Drugs Act 1971. They made a law at the start of the 70s anti-drug war, started by Richard Nixon, I believe, and now that wartime law remains. So it's still a war on drugs in the air, which has been waged for 54 years now, a 54 years war. I wondered what that smell was. It was the smell of someone fighting in the drug war as they smoked some cannabis right out in the open, but slyly, cupping the joint sneakily in their hand like a torch of rebellion and personal freedom against the law. A subtle protest, but still an attack on the drugs laws. And the drugs laws fight back. The newspapers tell us regularly of seizures, raids and large-scale cannabis grow operations and gangs smuggling cocaine through airports caught and jailed. So the newspapers wore a terror campaign at their readers, scandalizing the drug mules and cartels, gangs and syndicates. A stark warning, do this and it's long-term jail for you. I'm actually surprised that some of these criminals, most in fact, don't get the full sentence applicable by law. So perhaps there is some relaxation on the penalties going on there, which is perhaps indicative of judges' ability to see the sanity behind the war. But that's just from a casual interest in drugs news. So it's clear, the law still really doesn't like dealers and gangs and grow operations that generate large sums of money and large crops worth supposedly over £1 million in some instances. But from all my research, I can see that there is a subtle regional decriminalisation of cannabis and perhaps all drugs for personal possession. Where I used to live in Thames Valley, I was repeatedly not charged for evidence of cannabis. I was also not charged for evidence of possession of cannabis in Bournemouth. I was stopped by police once while waiting for a deal for a 3.5 of weed from a local dealer in Slough, and the police said they were really only interested in Class A dealing, not cannabis possession, not cannabis dealing, and they let me go. I feel like I got secret knowledge from the police there. Then I looked into it and they have a diversion scheme in place there in Thames Valley, and the reality was they didn't give a toss about me having a bong in the middle of the park. They were very good about it. So in a way, it's almost like the police don't really want to fight the drug war, but are still forced to, of course, by the law. However, I've heard of things such as deprioritisation in places like Durham, where apparently the police no longer chase after personal grows of a few amounts of plants. That's from hearsay, from the grapevine. So you better research that one yourself. But it's the law that's all wrong. I believe Professor David Nutt's drug harms index graph when it says alcohol is the most dangerous drug. Just look at the statistics for how many people alcohol kills a year. 2.5 million worldwide, I last read. And cannabis and psilocybin mushrooms are like 0, right? So the drugs classification system is biased and skewed and all wrong. If it's supposed to be measured by toxicity, then alcohol, heroin and crack cocaine should be in the highest class, like Class A, but that shouldn't be a banned class. It should be a warning class, as in Class A, warning, high toxicity and potential for addiction. And that should be the government message, and they should let the people decide, which the people do anyway. Class B would be warning, moderate intoxication and addiction potential. Class C, caution, mild intoxicant and long-term abuse potential. And they wouldn't be banned. They would all be legally available, but restrictions and guidelines for sale would differ depending on the toxicity classification. And let the people decide with adequate information about dosage, potential physical and mental harms, side effects, how to use it responsibly, how to avoid addiction, how to recover from addiction, and the state should provide adequate and robust addiction services for those wishing to quit, which they should be advised to, but it's legally up to them. Then the government has taken responsibility for the drug's dangers, warned the public, but treated them as responsible and free adults. So the laws in this country are all wrong for the modern era. People aren't dumb. They know there are places in the world where certain drugs, like cannabis especially, are legal. I think most people in the UK are aware that, for example, Canada has legal cannabis for sale, and America has legalized cannabis in many states for recreational use. Some people may be aware that Portugal notably has decriminalized the possession of personal small amounts of drugs and treats drug use as an administrative offence with a health intervention attached that's mandatory, as I understand. And they reported less overdose deaths after that, but don't quote me on that. Hopefully the pictures I've been overlaying on the screen helps to verify what I'm saying. So really, the UN, who I forgot to mention, have also got it all wrong. They're stuck in the 60s, man. Read it and weep. The 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, or whatever it's called. It's basically an international ban on legalizing drugs, aka the global drug war imposed upon the whole planet by its international law system. So there, we have the root of the problem. Britain can't legalise drugs because it fears sanction from the UN, just like any sesh head might feel afraid of the local bobby. States are bullied by international law into maintaining strong anti-drug laws. However, another reason why it's all messed up. Canada, Uruguay, Malta, Germany legalised cannabis for recreational use, no sanction from the UN. The Netherlands and their coffee shops, any sanction from the UN? Not so far as I'm aware. I just saw an Amsterdam coffee shop video come up on my YouTube feed today. They're alive and kicking out there still. So the UN is possibly tacitly admitting that the law sucks? A toleration approach by the UN? They need to update the universal laws on drugs not to be anti or pro, but to be balanced and fair, focusing on human rights and public health at the international level, not an all-out war on drugs, which, by the way, amounts to a war on the millions of otherwise law-abiding citizens who, for example, occasionally use internationally illegal drugs. It's fucked up because it really is a kind of psychological warfare, and in some places, physical warfare. You only need to look up the Philippines' war on drugs to realise that there really is a physical, fatal war on drugs still raging, with users and dealers shot in extrajudicial assassinations by the state. I mean, killing people for essentially trying to enjoy themselves betrays the state as a horrible, miserable, literal killjoy. So what's the solution? Completely review all the available science on drugs, all of them, including pharmaceuticals, perhaps using the assistance of AI, and craft some policies that neither ban nor promote the use of psychoactive drugs. And remember to include caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, and whatever they stick in energy drinks. Create an updated classification system based on the science digested. Produce appropriate warnings and guidance on healthy drug use, including not at all. And restrict the availability by age of majority. Allow for the regulated sale and international trade of recreational drugs. Effectively end the war on drugs and let us get on with our lives. Provide us with accurate, up-to-date scientific information about the drugs at an international level, and base the whole thing on the understanding that human adults are intelligent, responsible, capable individuals with a right to the state of their own body and what they choose to ingest, absorb, inhale, or otherwise use. Alternatively, the UN could take a gradual approach, decriminalising personal possession of the least harmful, most enjoyable, and medically, spiritually most significant drugs first, like psychedelics, with a low risk of harm profile like psilocybin mushrooms, MDMA and LSD, among others. Again, like I said, just my personal opinion as an onlooker. I mean, what do I know? Well, whatever the case, I hope the drug war ends soon because I've never tried LSD or DMT, and I think they could be beneficial to try as a psychological healer. But it also sounds fun too, from what I've read and watched and heard. And that's another aspect of the drug war. People at the grassroots level are still today fighting against what they must see as an unjust or even irrelevant laws by continuing to use drugs at festivals, in club toilets, at underground raves, at secret weed events and secret coffee shops. Even in the comfort of their own homes, people use drugs. Out on the street, people drink alcohol, coffee, smoke tobacco, smoke weed, inject heroin, smoke crack, smoke heroin. I've lived as a street homeless person. I've seen what homeless people get up to down quiet alleyways at night in the dark, or puffing crack smoke under a sleeping bag to hotbox it in a doorway to a council temporary housing unit, injecting heroin at night in a bin shed in the centre of town, sucking an egg-shaped pipe with heroin in a car park in Bournemouth. I've seen it all. People smoking cannabis bongs on the street in front of skateboarders skating. Drugs are everywhere, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone be arrested for drugs and charged in my whole life. So it's all wrong from the top down. It starts at international law, which needs to be updated and changed to be based around legally regulating the international drug trade, decriminalising all personal possession of drugs, like fines maximum, I would suggest, maybe even maximum of 6 months jail time for illegal dealing against the regulatory system without a licence, for example. And jail should be at least sanitary around the world, for goodness sakes. So there you go. That was my long ass opinion on the war on drugs. If you found this video interesting, remember, I was on drugs when I wrote this video, but I'm not now. Only joking. Remember to like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks very much for watching, people. I've been Shiva Wilson, campaigning for safer, more compassionate drugs laws and an end to the drug war. Good night.